How's everybody doing?
Good, sir.
Are you excited about the way the wind is blowing? Yeah, I am. This is the third time that I've done this. Now, when I say this, the first one was traveling around the entire country during the lead up to the presidential election, and my focus was not on endorsing any particular candidate because I started before the President Trump actually became the nominee, was to oppose Hillary Clinton based on constitutional and law enforcement perspective as a retired founding member of the Department of Homeland Security. And I knew, because it wasn't theoretical for me, she's actually the one that shut down the case that resulted in San Bernardino. I mean, she was Secretary of State. She sent 7 lawyers and 3 SES individuals to the National Targeting Center in March of 2012, and they said they had concerns about our focus on Tablighi Jamaat. Now, State Department doesn't need to be intruding into the law enforcement arena, but they did. That's what you call hubris. The audacity that they thought they could come over to the leading top headquarters of intelligence in the United States for Homeland Security and National Security and tell us that they were concerned about the way our evidence was leading. But they did. And I was at the meeting. My dad told me when I was in high school to take shorthand. I thought it was because I was a nerd, you know. And I was a nerd. I was in a class of 17 girls the whole year learning shorthand, and I never went out on a date with a single one of them. But I'll tell you what, I learned shorthand like a duck takes to water. And what does that have to do with anything? Well, I'm sitting in this meeting listening to all these lawyers tell us about their concerns, which have nothing whatsoever to do with law enforcement and national security, writing every single word they said down. And that happened several times during the course of my career, where I just happened to be in a meeting or a place. And the thing about intelligence is that you don't always recognize at any given moment that this particular event or piece of evidence, like that water bottle sitting on the table or the pair of glasses there, might actually be the key to opening up an entire case. You just don't know at the time. So the rule in Intel is you never discard anything. You keep it, you put it in the allegorical plastic bag, and you archive it for possible future use. So little did I know that, let's say in May of 2009, when I started putting records into the law enforcement database about the network operating in Boston around the hub of the Islamic Society of Boston, that it would turn out to be essential information in what became known as the Boston Marathon bombing. And that my own administration, my own law enforcement colleagues through my chain of command deliberately and intentionally removed that information out of the classified law enforcement database. And then we heard from my former boss, Janet Napolitano, that, well, we didn't get a ping on Tsarnaev. You may remember her saying that. Well, the reason you didn't get a ping, Ms. Napolitano, which you didn't bother to tell the American people, is because you and your boss, Obama, ordered that information to be taken out of the system. So you're not going to get a ping if there's nothing there, are you? And besides that, Tsarnaev came into the country with a green card. Did you know that you're not allowed to travel internationally on a green card? You have to have a passport of your home country. So how in the world did he even get around? And how did he get back to the United States? If you get pulled over for a bad taillight or whatever, and you don't have your driver's license, what will likely happen to you? They're going to run a check on you, right? And if you have a warrant outstanding or a suspended license or whatever, where are you going to go? Take a ride in the back of the cop car, right? Well, Tsarnaev comes in, he stands right in front of a CBP officer. He doesn't have his paperwork, his passport, and yet we DTR'd him. That means down the road. And then Janet Napolitano says, well, we didn't get a ping. You're telling me the trained law enforcement officers can't tell that there's something wrong when the guy's standing right in front of them? You need a computer to tell you? If that's the case, then we don't need law enforcement officers, do we? We just use a machine. Anyway, I put all that information in the system. It subsequently got either modified or deleted. And it all culminated really between the Boston Marathon bombing and then subsequently another group that I worked on called Tablighi Jamaat, which means the party of the promoters. They are the evangelicals, if you will, the evangelists of the Muslim world. And they were coming here to America in groups of 3, 4, and 5 through the Atlanta airport, which, by the way, you've heard is the busiest airport in the world, right? So really all you have to do is essentially stand in one place and the whole world comes to you, which is the case. And I started noticing this trend in '06 of 3, 4, 5 guys coming into the airport, passing through the line, and they'd all have a letter signed by the same person. But that same person who signed their invitation letter was already on the radar for connections to terrorism. So what do you call that in law enforcement? A clue. Those are the dots that we're supposed to be connecting, right? And so I started putting these dots together. One thing led to another. I ended up being transferred up to the National Targeting Center, the elite unit in an underground or a bunker deep underground. It really does look like the movies. It does. There's these really big, giant, let's say bigger than this, several monitors around the room, each one with a different station, so we can watch media and current events on CNN and Fox and whatever. And then there's cubicles with no walls. We all can see each other. And we have 4 monitors, the big ones like this, are running 15 programs at once, kind of like juggling. And the idea is to evaluate what we call the flight manifest, the list of people that are coming into the country, and see if there's anybody that we might get a hit on before they arrive in the country. That's what we're supposed to do. That's called vetting. Remember that? So that's what I did. And then my case, the Tablighi Jamaat case, had so much power to it that I ended up getting transferred into the advanced targeting team, and did something that, according to the program manager, was unprecedented for a TDYer to actually work in the advanced targeting team. That's like unheard of, especially when I was working on my own case. I say my own, it's the one I started years prior, and then kept sending information up to NTC, which is what you're supposed to do. It's called cooperation within law enforcement. And they realized that there was a trend, and it went from a case to a project to what's called a global initiative. And that global initiative is what got the attention of the State Department people, who said, we can't have this. You're violating the civil rights and civil liberties by assuming that they might be affiliated with a terrorist group, meaning Tablighi Jamaat. And so we have concerns. Yeah, they sure did. They had so many concerns, they shut the case down. And that wasn't enough. They deleted the information completely out of the system. And that still wasn't enough. They came after the person that put the information in the system. If you look in the back of the book, there's a appendix. And I know I don't blame people. Really, I honestly don't blame them for finding it virtually psychologically impossible to believe that what I'm saying is true, and it shouldn't be true. And I don't blame you for being hesitant to believe me, because we're Americans. We were brought up to believe that our elected officials and people in positions who have taken the oath have our best interests in mind, and that they do their job and we'll do our job, and we won't have to worry about looking over our shoulders for what might be coming our way. Is that right? Yeah. And so I put the letters in the back of the book because I wanted to remedy the natural reluctance, hesitancy to believe that what I said was really true. And if you will read the connections between what I write about in the book and the letters, you'll find that I'm not only telling you what's true, but I actually understate everything, which I have a habit of doing on purpose. Because if I overwhelm people with too much information, there's a thing in science called attenuation, and that is like for a rose. If you smell a rose a certain number of times, you will not smell it at all. Your senses become saturated. It's a different way of putting it. Is like a buffet. Even if you save up for 3 days to go to your favorite Chinese buffet, I don't care how hungry you are, you're only going to be able to eat so much at once. And that's the way it is. You can only take so much of this at one shot. You have to take it one bite at a time. And try to read the whole book and absorb it all in one reading. You might think you are, but you're going to find out that it's very overwhelming. Because your tendency is to say that this couldn't possibly be true. Thus the letters in the back of the book. It is true, friends. And the thing about it is it's a live story. The vow that I took to help protect our Constitution and our threat from our country from threat, both foreign and domestic, is still a live vow. How many here have taken the vow? Either law enforcement, politically, military, some form or another. Is your vow still active? If you were asked to do something related to help defending the Constitution, you would do it, wouldn't you? If it was within your ability to do it. So you retire from active duty maybe, but your vow is still active. And I don't want anybody here to feel left out, because we can all take the vow as citizens, that you do what you can, where you are, in the arena that you operate to fulfill a legacy, if you will, and your destiny as a U.S. American citizen to stand up for the Constitution and the values that our country was founded on. After all, the Constitution is a legal document that defines our sovereignty, which is that we've been endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable gifts, I'll call them. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's our sovereignty, recognition that we are endowed by our Creator the right to live a free life and pursue our goals and our dreams without being coerced or invaded or have insurrections or outbreaks of violence putting us at risk, which is the primary duty of not only the federal government, as per Article 1, but also the state government, in particular as for Article 6. Most of us living, or people that are not that much younger than we are, have actually never seen the American government function the way it was supposed to, meaning a checks and balances form of government. And President Trump is like a man, he's like Dorothy and her friends in The Wizard of Oz, where they squirted the Tin Man with the oil can. He's been rusted up for so long that nobody ever saw him move. And he starts to move, and squeaks and creaks. And finally they get him, in shape. And he's a little wobbly. But eventually he manages to get back on track again, and that's Trump. He's spraying the Tin Man of America, and we're starting to move again. And a lot of people have never seen this before, and it's kind of surprising to them. They didn't realize that this is the way our government. And that's the thing with Kavanaugh. The reason that the debacle, the charade of the Kavanaugh confirmation was that they know intuitively or even objectively that when Kavanaugh was nominated and confirmed that this liaison with illegality and abuse of the judicial part of the government was over. They knew it. They've been used to implementing political policy through the force of the judiciary, starting with 1973, Roe v. Wade.
Yep.
And the whole argument with Kavanaugh wasn't about his qualities as a judge, it was whether or not we could continue killing our own children. Really, after all, isn't that what it's about? We've normalized the killing of our own children, and we're so addicted to it, we can't conceive of another way of life without it. But I hope that Roe v. Wade will not live to be 50. That would be 2023. That states, for example, take action, form a coalition, either one state or several, and sue the federal government for states' rights. And initiate that process. Because if we choose life, we will be blessed. If we choose death, it's inevitable that we're going to reap what we sow. And that's one of the reasons why we're incapable as a country of really recognizing, identifying, and responding to the threats that we face. Because we've cauterized our own brain. It's physiologically or psychologically impossible for us to recognize a threat. It's kind of undefined and often over there when we're normalizing the killing of our own children. You value the life of every individual. You won't argue about sanctuary cities, will you? Why in the world would you let people come into your community that may put your family or friends or community at risk. You wouldn't even discuss it. It would never come up. It would be an inconceivable idea. Same with the border. This whole thing that's coming up, the caterpillar that's coming up through Mexico right now, wants to gnaw its way right through the wall and come right into our country and then sit there and wait for us to provide them with all sorts of benefits as if it's their right. Now we go back to the NTC. The reason why they shut the cases down that I was working on is because they said that I was violating the civil rights and civil liberties of foreign nationals by saying that, or assuming, quote unquote, in a racist and biased and bigoted way, that they might be affiliated with a terrorist group, which they are. That's like living in Alice in Wonderland where the dormouse has a .45. Think about that. Amusing up until the time the gun comes out. Then it's not so funny anymore. Or Humpty Dumpty saying, words mean exactly what I want them to mean, no more and no less. But why don't let's substitute the words and say borders. Borders mean exactly what I want them to mean, no more and no less. So no walls, no borders, open borders, shut down all immigration, abolish ICE, except that we want sanctuary cities. Hold on. How do you know when you get into a sanctuary city? If you're high-speeding it on 94 from Wisconsin over to Twin, and you're bound and determined to get there, I'm not for sure if the Twins are really sanctuary, let's just say they are. How do you know when you've arrived in a safe place? How do you know you got there?
No cops.
No, it's called the city limits. It's a border. So the left says no walls, no borders, that they're racist, but they're simultaneously very passionate about borders. That's a pathology, friends. That's what you call a psychosis. Something is ready to install. Sounds like the government, doesn't it?
You can't even plan that.
Our sovereignty and the Constitution versus the threat we face. I noticed traveling around that the missing word in our political discussion, in our vocabulary, is the concept of sovereignty. And I'll hopefully explain that a little bit more. By the way, everybody here is now a member of the Plymouth Patriots. Have you heard about the Minnesota Minutemen? It's an ad hoc group. Some of you are on the mailing list. Anybody here that wants to be on it, just let me know. It's the little fish. I call us the little fish. What about the little fish? Well, in every pond there's little fish and there's big fish, right? You'd agree with that, since you're fishermen up here in Minnesota? Well, the little fish don't always know what to do they? They're sort of scared of the big fish, too. In fact, they're not sure the big fish might not eat them. But the actual weight of all the little fish in the pond is actually bigger than all the big fish. And there's one other big advantage, too, and that is the little fish can go places where the big fish can't. But I've also been adopted by the big fish, meaning the super PAC here in Minnesota. And so now we've created a portal where the little fish can swim around with the big fish. And it's making a difference, isn't it? Wardlow's ahead by 7. And when the Star Tribune says that, even though I don't follow polls, I don't follow them because I don't want to bias myself one way or another. Get overconfident or discouraged. So I just focus ahead like when you're driving at high speed, and I don't pay too much attention to anything except the road right ahead of me. And the reason, by the way, I'm here is only for one purpose, one specific laser beam focus, to prevent Keith Ellison from becoming Attorney General of Minnesota. Why would I do that? Is it theoretical? Meaning I just don't like him, so I decided to come up here? No, for me it's not theoretical because I worked under people just like him who were called Secretary of Homeland Security, like Janet Napolitano and J.H. Johnson, and or Attorney General of the Department of Justice, a.k.a. Eric Holder, who convened a grand jury to find probable cause to indict me and put me in prison for violating the civil rights and civil liberties of foreign nationals. They would have actually put me in jail for doing my job and not blinked. period. Keith Ellison is just like those people. He's a co-chairman of the Democratic Party. Eric Holder just said recently in public, if they go low, we kick them. Can you imagine working for somebody like that who's supposed to be the top cop in the whole federal government? What kind of environment that must have been? Well, for me, I don't have to imagine. And I would hate to see anybody like Ellison inflict himself on your state. So in the remaining time that we have, 12, 13 days, if there's anybody you haven't talked to about voting, please do. And if you are not sure about what you can do, here's a really simple solution. Just call your district coordinator and ask him, what can I do? Help. And just do what they ask you. Make phone calls, do door knocks, hand out flyers, whatever it might be, because there's no such thing as small. Remember the little fish? We're all the little fish. But now we got the little fish working together. And as I travel around, and it's not a criticism, it's an observation, that's the biggest problem that we've had in the alliance. The conservative alliance is the inability to work together effectively. And or to focus on one single issue instead of constantly getting distracted by lots and lots of other things. It might be important, but at the moment there's only one thing that's really important between now and November 6th, and that's to prevent him from being elected, because the rest of the people that are running, we're pretty used to that. We know how to deal with a far-left progressive. We've seen him plenty before. I don't like it, but we're used to it. This is another creature entirely. And I used to track him and the organizations that he is part of when I was still active duty. I know his shoe size. I know all about him. And his buddies, like Assad Zaman, who's the leader of the Muslim American Society, and the people that lead CARE, the Council on American and Islamic Relations, and or Islamic Society of North America, and or the leaders of the Hawala Network that's taken tens, if not hundreds of $millions out of the state of Minnesota right under the noses of the law enforcement officers who, if I had the magic easy button and a commission from the governor, we could probably shut down the Hawala Network within 2 weeks and stop the movement out. It would be, quote unquote, easy to do. This is what I used to do for a living. That was what I was trained to do, friends. Founding member of the Department of Homeland Security, we did outbound currency exams. That means you go down to MSP and you track the flow of traffic, and you see people that might, by indicators we call them, be carrying cash out. And we say, sir, may I see your, I forget what the little form is, it's a little form you're supposed to fill out. They give it to you. How much currency are you declaring? X amount. Well, we may count it, please. Reluctantly, they take it out, and you find out they're wearing it in their belts, and there's stuff down their underwear, and it's stuff in the bottom of suitcases, and it's stacks of cash, tens if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, sir, you only declared this amount. But how come you have this much more? Stuttering, stammering, excuses, whatever, but they're smuggling money out. It's part of what's called a hawala, or money fraud. Money fraud, hawala doesn't mean money fraud, but it's a fraudulent way that they acquire the money to take it out of the state into the black hole of the other side of the world. And everything that goes out is Sharia compliant, which means 1/8 of it is provided for the mujahideen. So whether you realize it or not, the money that's going out of Minnesota that ends up in Somalia is going specifically, at least 1/8 of it, to the support of jihad. That's pretty hardcore. That's pretty gnarly, isn't it? Wouldn't you prefer that law enforcement officers would be given the liberty to actually enforce the law and stop that? But what if I come into your state and I'm only here less than a day, and there it is like a bright, shiny red light or yellow light in the middle of a small town? You know, one little blinking light. It's as clear as noonday. Here's a Hawala network. Here's another one. Same thing in Michigan when I was there in the summer before the primary. I never did finish telling you the other two. It was Clinton in the presidential, and then it was Abdul al-Sayed in the primary in Michigan, and we were successful there too. He's a Muslim Brotherhood candidate for governor. And now number 3 is prevent Ellison from being elected as AG. 2 out of 3 so far.
Yeah. We'll make it 3 out of 3.
Yes, I'm cautiously optimistic at this point. So, here we are. Remember Sodom and Gomorrah? Anybody? It says that after they were struck blind that they wearied themselves to find the door. What a picture. Well, you don't have to imagine. There it is right there. Kavanaugh's been nominated and they're screaming and yelling at the top of their voice, and they're actually literally beating on the doors, the brass doors of the Supreme Court. Our poor pitiful countrymen, and we've gone this far. The grown-up people with other attributes and noble qualities about them that should be making a living and having families and becoming doctors and curing cancer are flinging themselves against the walls of the Supreme Court in some absurd protest, virtue signaling about a man whose character was completely dissected simply because we want to continue, as I said earlier, aborting our own children. That's what it was all about. We need to grow up from that, don't you think? So what are we fighting against? I've been talking to you, and what I'm going to point out, it's a little hard to see because of the lighting. In about the middle where it says in the red, alter or abolish it and institute a new government. What exactly is the left, the progressive left, trying to do, and or the global Islamic movement? Remarkably, it's buried right in the middle of the Declaration of Independence. It's really quite simple when you grasp it, like a handle of a suitcase. Once you grab a hold of it, it really becomes pretty clear. What they're seeking to do is to alter or abolish our current form of a constitutional Republican government, and replace it with one which is either more diverse and inclusive and fair, as defined by the left, and or very precisely defined by the global Islamic movement in one simple word, Sharia. Sharia law, Sharia, is the definition of sovereignty according to Islam. And it's a supremacist ideology, meaning there's no room for any other form of government except for one, Sharia. There are no exclusions, friends. They don't give us an exception because the Constitution is saturated in biblical values and is the most clearly defined document ever written about our rights, where they come from, and that the Creator Himself instituted government among men in order to simply preserve the liberties that He so generously gave us. So shouldn't we all be involved in the process of the government? By the way, politics, I looked it up, it means the affairs of the city. So if we take the original meaning of the word politics, shouldn't we all be involved in the affairs of the city? We already are. We go to work, we have friends and family, we go shopping. We're already involved in the affairs of the city. So why do we barricade off one particular aspect of it called in modern day politics, i.e. voting, for example? I'll tell you a funny story. I was at a sports bar the other night. It was the day after the nomination of Kavanaugh was secure. It was the 7th of October, Sunday. So I'm done and my friend, we're walking out to the front door, the entrance of the restaurant, sports bar, and they're coming through. I said, what do you think of the nomination of Kavanaugh? Pretty good deal. High fives, fist bumps, everybody's happy about it. I said, how many jokes do you suppose there's going to be in the next few weeks and months about, I drink beer, I drank beer, I still like beer. You know, she says, the one lady says, oh yeah, that one's too good to pass up. And then I said, you know, all the microbreweries in the upper Midwest are he's their great hero now, Kavanaugh, because all their sales are going to all go up. You know, nobody's ever endorsed beer like that before. And then the other lady chimes in and she says, you know, I don't even drink beer, but I'm going to start now. And that's grassroots, friend. Substitute the word vote. You know, I don't even vote, but I'm going to start now.
Right.
And that's the point. The secret of why we have wind in our sails right now, instead of stalling and run out of gas, is really the Kavanaugh effect. Because those of us in the conservative side of the equation, if he had been actually forced out and not nominated, even I would have been mightily tempted to become discouraged. And it's hard for me to get discouraged. You think of all that I went through, and I still have faith in my country, but fortunately we don't have to worry about that. He was nominated. And think of it, it is a turning point in the history of our country. It's going to be not a reversal of, but it's going to be as monumental as Roe v. Wade was in '73, as that it was the beginning of a course adjustment in our country, indicated by, finally, our elected representatives actually stood up for constitutional principles, let alone more fundamental concepts of due process and innocent until proven guilty. So thank the Lord for that, because I don't think any of us would be in the same mood we are now, whatever that might be, if he had been prevented from being confirmed. So what they're seeking to do is to alter or abolish the current form of government. Pretty fundamental when you look at it. Remember algebra, how you're always doing the variables on each side of the equation and you boil this big giant long equation down to a little handful? That's what that does. Whatever you see coming at you in the nature of the threat, whether it's from the left or the right, it really comes down to this. Are they seeking to alter or abolish the current form of government? Phooey on the Constitution. We don't need that old piece of paper. Phooey on due process, etc., etc. Phooey on border protection. Sovereignty, schmovereignty, we don't need that either. Shut down ICE. That's all that. Alter or abolish the current form of government. And so the other question is, what are we fighting for? See, a lot of us could tell you, everybody here has a little list of things that they're most concerned about. That's what we're fighting against. But what I did find, and it's another observation, is that people were not as capable of immediately defining what they're fighting for. And what we're actually fighting for is the preservation of our sovereignty, which is the right to live under the form of government that we would choose without it being imposed on us by coercion or deception, aka the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's our constitutional form of government. And that's what we're fighting for. And the best expression of that is this whole drama with the declaration or the recognition of Jerusalem as a capital of Israel. And the subsequent announcement that we're going to put the embassy there. And the whole world goes into a spasm of hysteria telling America and Israel, you can't do that. Says who? Well, says us. On what authority? Well, our own authority. Words mean exactly what we want them to mean, and you can't do it. Oh yeah? And they did it, didn't they? And all the threats, and all the barking, the dog was on a chain, as we find out. And so we have the embassy now in Jerusalem. That's a perfect illustration of this, sovereignty. The right of one sovereign nation and another to conduct their affairs the way they see fit without having geniuses and politicians impose themselves into the process and say, you can't do it. Trump says, just watch me. That's the first time in 25 years, that's 2,500 years that that's happened. Cyrus, king of Persia, was the last one. Amazing. We're seeing history in so many different ways. How about the economy turning around so fast? The economy numbers are now better than they've ever been in anybody's lifetime that's here right now. And we were told, weren't we told over and over, we'd never see that again. Don't even, it's gone and it'll never be back. Just get used to it, right? Weren't we? How in the world did it happen so fast? I'm also optimistic that in terms of the law enforcement arena, which is the one that was the first one to get corrupted, and it will be the last one to get reformed, because it has the most layers of insulation around it. After all, who's going after Trump with the Russiagate thing? Law enforcement. FBI, CIA, DOJ. And they got so addicted, aka the deep state, that they were used to this, and they were forced to come out into the open in order to accomplish their goals. Before they had the luxury of being behind cover, behind the walls of the agency. But now, in order to accomplish their goal, because they're in a desperate position, they've been forced to come out. And the face that we see is not very pretty, is it? Well, that's the face I saw when I was behind the walls of the agency, when there were no cameras looking over the shoulder, and those people had complete latitude and authority to run people like me over, stomp us literally into the ground. And he did it without blinking an eye. So it's not theoretical for me, friends. And what are the weapons of our warfare? I'm going to go through just 2 of the 4 that I showed you. Let me go back. Article 1, Article 4, 6, and Amendment 14 are real key provisions in the Constitution. Pop quiz. What gives the President the authority to send a militia to the border? He said so, right? It's weird. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, a month ago, I was using it as a rhetorical question. What would happen if President Trump said he was going to send a militia to the border? The whole left would erupt into another spasm of hysteria. It's not even rhetorical anymore. It's actually happening. The answer to the pop quiz is Article 1, Paragraph 8, line 15, that he can send a militia to the border to prevent insurrections and invasions. He has the utmost right to do it. But it's been so long since we've seen our government function correctly that it even seems radical, doesn't it? But it's actually fundamentally constitutional. So, just a couple examples. The federal government, Article 1, is to establish a uniform role in naturalization and sending forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. Is this caterpillar coming up through Mexico, an invasion? Is it just an arbitrary, random act that just, like a flock of birds coming together and flying around in the night? You know how they do, like this? Or is there something more to it? Of course there is. And then this is the 14th Amendment. This is why sanctuary cities are legal. Because no state can pass a law that usurps the privileges and immunities of citizens. Now when they create a sanctuary city and they force the rest of the tax-paying citizens to support it, they're violating the 14th Amendment. So why hasn't anybody ever taken action? Because our whole political structure has been corrupted and or frozen by rust. And so we need the oil can, some WD-40. And that's us. We're the WD-40. We are the ones that make the squeaky wheel stop squeaking. Because it's of, for, and by the people. If the grassroots component of the government doesn't work and the federal government, see this, there's got to be a connection like jumper cables, a touch in the middle, from the bottom up and from the top down. The federal is not designed to reach down and push the magic easy button and solve all the problems at the local and state level. It's designed to work from the bottom up and the top down and meet in the middle, complete the circuit, if you will. Does that make sense? See, the little fish aren't so little, are they? We're like the little alligator thingies on the jumper cables. Grab a hold of the post of the battery. Very essential. And if one of them is disconnected out of the 4, what happens? Nothing. If this is the middle of the winter and you're trying to, and you're depending on a, get a battery jump to get out of the blizzard and it doesn't work, you're fast getting into a real serious situation, aren't you? So the global Islamic movement is one of these forces or threats that we face. Right now in London, they're building mosques as fast as they can, and they've got Sharia courts going now that are implementing Sharia by default. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Wow. Why is Sharia bad? Or I'll rephrase it, why is Sharia law illegal here? Article 6. And that's one of the things I've encouraged people to do, is that when you take a political position or make a statement or an argument, you literally can cite chapter and verse from the Constitution of why your position is solid. If you can't do that, go back and do your homework. Because if you can't do that, you're going to lose every time. Because our adversaries rule the subjective definitions of words. And we've been fighting in the arena of the subjective for way too long. It's time for us to take the channel clicker and change the channel to the Constitution channel. And literally be able to cite, well, why is Sharia law illegal in America? Are you some kind of a racist? Don't you believe in equality? What about the First Amendment? Hold it. The First Amendment is just that, an amendment. Built on what? The Articles of the Constitution. Does the First Amendment supersede Article 6? No, it's built on top of it, with the understanding that no form of government, even if it's called a religion, can take authority over the U.S. Constitution, period. And that the judges of each state are bound by it. They're not supposed to be arbitrarily making rulings based on their own political worldview that contradict the Constitution. But they have been, haven't they? Called circuit court. And that whole thing's going to come to a screeching halt now, because the Supreme Court has finally got the hole in the wall that the political tank crashed through repaired. Meaning Kavanaugh et al. And then we used to do this all the time. These are scenarios. But we see Ray just said, and look at the date. I put the dates up there to show you this is all quite recent. Whenever I give presentations, I always bring it right up to the current time. I'm not talking about stuff that's weeks, months, and years old. This is all brand new, real time. That there's at least 1,000 terrorist cases going on in the United States. Gee, I wonder what would have happened if my own agency wouldn't have taken that information out of the system, starting in 6, 7, 8, and 9. It created a black hole. And that black hole stretches bigger and bigger as time goes on. But it actually doubles in size with every year, because not only is that old information that would have been there as a historical archive making the hole bigger, but nothing new is going in. So what would have been put in is missing too. So the thing gets bigger and bigger. It really is like a black hole in space. Can it be amended? Yep. That's why I brought up the economy. As fast as the economy turned around, the law enforcement arena can be fixed too. Because virtually every single law enforcement boy and girl is waiting for the authorization. Because the unique thing about law enforcement that's different in the other arenas, social or political, is that it's a top-down hierarchy of authority, a chain of command. No line officer is going to take a case if he knows it's going to jeopardize his career unless his boss gives him authority to do it. Therefore, it has to come from top down. In this case, it got to come from the president, right through the DOJ, right on down to the local and state level. But it can happen as fast as the economy. So the point is, here's, we're talking about the global Islamic movement. Terrorism results from unjust policies, not from Islamic ideology, but it's your fault. The other's fault. We're the victim. We're being oppressed by unjust policies, hint, hint, America, and therefore there's terrorism. It's your fault we're doing all this. We take no responsibility for the fact that we kill you. Because it's your fault. And that's the danger of a victim and or supremacy ideology. If we stand in the way of the advancement of Islam, we are automatically criminals or guilty. And the only thing that you need to do in order to become guilty from that kind of a perspective is called breathing. Just breathe. And then here's some more information. This is about Israel being the culture of Satan. And this is Abbas's spokesman. Remember, the moderate leader of the Palestinian Authority. And by the way, we can make this PowerPoint available somehow, either through Marnie and Deb. I'll make it. You guys can email it, and you can have it, because all the information, all the citations and the links and everything are down in the notes section of each of the slides. You don't have to, look around for it. It's all right there for you. Now I want to show you this. The thing in the blue box, that word says Al-Qaeda. You've heard that word before, right? Once or twice. In the Arabic part up there, where the red line is, it says Al-Muslima Al-Qaeda Al-Islamiyya. And that means the observant Muslim base, just like it says down there. Well, what the heck is the observant Muslim base? You see faces of it. It's called Keith Ellison. It's called Daoud Walid. It's called Abdul Al-Sayed. It's called Ilan Omar. That's the observant. It's called Linda Sarsour. It's called Assad Zaman. Marnie, maybe she can tell you about it in a few minutes. saw the observant Muslim base up close and personal about 10 days ago. It's real, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
And what's our time frame anyhow?
8:30.
And it's 7:30 now? Don't worry, I won't talk that long.
Keep talking.
We'll have questions and stuff. Anyhow, the point is, what is the point of this? Well, first of all, Al-Qaeda is not an organization. We all think it's an organization called Al-Qaeda, don't we? Al-Qaeda is a concept. We use it in our language. We call it the political base. But there's no place that you can go downtown Minneapolis up to one of the tall buildings and in this 23rd floor, there's a room and it says Republican base. And then right next to it is another sign that says Democratic base. There is no, it's because it's a concept. When you appeal to your political base, it means the people that believe in you and will vote for you. But it's not an organization, is it? Al-Qaeda is not an organization. It's a concept. It means the observant, the people that are obedient and follow Sharia law, the Muslim base. And this paragraph tells you that the Muslim Brotherhood's intention is to create this observant Muslim base in where? North America. They don't even see a distinction between Canada and the United States. It's all North America because we all speak English, more or less. So what they're trying to do is create this observant Muslim base that will basically do whatever they're told to do. And this was written by the Muslim Brotherhood, and that's the point. You see in there, over there on the right, it says Muslim. See there? Who wrote this? The Muslim Brotherhood. That means care, and that means Keith Ellison's people. Wrote this in 1987. This is 10 years before Osama bin Laden issued his global fatwa declaring jihad against the West in America. 10 years before. It didn't start with the global jihad front, is what it's actually called. We dubbed it Al-Qaeda, but they never called themselves that. They called themselves the global jihad front. And all this ridiculous argument about the meaning of jihad that you hear from CARE, for example, when Osama bin Laden and the 4 other founders of the original, what we call Al-Qaeda, which is actually made up of 12 coalition organizations, not just one guy who made one organization. 5 people that had a coalition of 12, all the way including Turkmenistan, Egypt, the Philippines, Africa. It was already a global coalition at the time that it was formed, and it came to the surface over in Afghanistan under the leadership of Ayman al-Zawahiri and Osama bin Laden. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm.
Some do, a couple nodding. But how come it is 17 years after 9/11 and we don't know this? Don't you think we should? You know what? If I had not had integrity and been able to survive what I went through, I wouldn't be standing here telling you either, would I? Why would you come and listen to a person who shipwrecked his own integrity by doing something illegal? Because they had a misplaced idea, like Bradley Manning or the WikiLeaker or Edward Snowden, that this is important information, it needs to be put out to the public, but violated the chain of command in the process of doing it. Even though there is no clearly defined chain of command, nonetheless, they violated it. I followed it. And the reason I was able to follow it is because of one particular person's liaison, Michelle Bachman. I sat with her today, and we had about a 3-hour conversation, including one that you'll be hearing on Saturday, with Jan Martell's radio show. She was the very first person in Congress who listened to me and set off a sequence of events that led to now 65 times and counting that I've gone to Congress to tell them the same thing I'm telling you, except for its classified level. I'm not even showing you the classified level. I'm showing you the open source level, which is bad enough, right? Imagine if I gave you the rest of the details. If basically like you being able to put on some special binoculars and look down into the water and see all the really big fish way down there. You know, the megalodons down there below. And they are there. But again, I'm still very hopeful. We have seen a lot of intervention and a lot of turning around in just the last couple of years or so, right? Haven't we? So that's an introduction. This is the Muslim Brotherhood, friends. This is CARE. Who puts out this document telling us exactly what they intend to do, and now we're seeing it on full display virtually everywhere you look. Marnie saw it. It's not theoretical for Marnie, not that she may, not implying that maybe before that it was, but if there was any element or hint of possible thinking that was only sort of arbitrarily abstract and not real, it's just gone now, isn't it? Yeah. It's like the leaves that blow away in the fall. It's as real as it gets, isn't it? And this is the symbol of the Muslim Brotherhood, and the lettering across the middle there, the white from the right to the left, says Al-Ikhwan, Al-Muslimun, the Brothers of Islam, aka the Muslim Brotherhood. Do you notice any exclusion zones when America comes around? That it's a no-go zone? No, not even in Minnesota. I don't see one even there. What about the two swords? Is there an olive branch there somewhere? Cleverly disguised on the blade of the sword? Maybe that should be something of concern. Why two swords then? Why does it take two? To enforce Sharia law internally and to push Sharia law externally. Capital, you know, they enforce it with the sword in Saudi Arabia, for example, and they promote it with the sword externally. And what about the yellow word down at the bottom? Do you think that might be important to know? It says Wa'ayuda, which means to prepare. So what's the natural question there?
Prepare for jihad.
You guys are really good. It means prepare to slaughter your enemies and terrify them in battle. It's Quran 860, Al-Anfal, the spoils of war. Probably the most singular violent verse in the entire Quran. You think that the Muslim Brotherhood just picked that one by accident? And that people who read that don't know? Just like if I said Shama, some people can finish that, and all they need to do is say one word, Shama Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Or if I say John 3, there you go. It's just like that. All you have to do is see that word and you know, like that, what it is saying. It's a universally understood word from a universally understood verse, Al-Anfal, the spoils of war, which talks all about plundering the resources of the unbelievers. Hawala, Minnesota. And this is just another example. The Muslim Brotherhood, our supposed friends, according to James Platford, remember him? 2012. Transfer of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem classifies America as an enemy state and all its interests. What does that mean? Just what it says. Will be subject to the political position of the interests of the Zionist entity. What do they want to do with Israel? They want to barrage them. They want to drive them in the sea. Rahim, Shahadin, Milyonin, Al-Quds. Rahim, Shahadin, Milyonin, Al-Quds. Sounds scary, doesn't it? It means we will march by the millions as martyrs to take Jerusalem. When did they say that? At the end of the Arab Spring, when Morsi took over as the leader of Egypt. The Ikhwan, Al-Muslimun, took over Egypt. And they brought in with Al-Qaradawi probably 200,000, 20, 30-something men. Rahim, Shahadin, Milyonin, Al-Quds. They told you right there what their intention was all along. And it wasn't a political, democratic Arab Spring. It was an implementation of Sharia law in Egypt as a platform to go and take back Jerusalem. Called Al-Quds, means the holy place in Arabic. I watched the CNN guy. Isn't it wonderful? Democracy's come to Egypt at last. One of the weirdest things I ever saw. While they're shouting in the background, that's Alice in Wonderland right there. So anyway, should we take them at face value? And look when it was, 2017, right after, 10 days after the declaration, which was the 6th of December. I was there with the USCMO on the South Mall, and all the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood front groups, the Shura Council, were gathered on one platform. I went in disguise. I think I actually wore this coat with my black beanie, big old sunglasses, and I stood right in the middle, about this far from Nihad Awad. And I'll tell you, and all the rest of those guys that run the MB, the Muslim Brotherhood in North America, it's very weird, friends, to be a retired law enforcement officer with a specialty in counterterrorism, to literally walk up and stand right next to the people that should have been shut down more than 10 years ago. What the heck are you guys doing out here saying, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, over and over again? Do you think they mean it? No, they probably misunderstand what they probably don't really mean it. That's what the geniuses in Washington said. Anyway, our supposed friends have declared war on us. And yet they're walking around in the halls of Congress virtually every day, and you got one running for Attorney General right now. And what do I say that for? How can I prove it? That's a bold statement, Mr. Haney. He speaks at CARE events. He did this year in New York at their annual banquet. He's a keynote speaker, and he's been doing it for 10 years. And the person that Marnie encountered, Assad Zaman, is his financial supporter. He's the leader of MAS, Muslim American Society, right here in River City. Or right over there in River City. So this is another one. It's even worse, I tell you, worse than the Ikhwan, and that is the Assembly of Muslim Jurists of America. You see some of the similarity in the iconography, meaning picture of the world. It's a little bit harder to see, but you can. And the mosque, by the way, you know, the tower, that's called a rabat. Rabat means stronghold, fortress. It's a symbol of conquest. And the book is obviously the Quran. By the way, what that says in the middle is, if you lack wisdom, go to those who have it, applying, of course, that these are the guys that have it. And what about the wheat-bearing things on the side? That means Al-Arab al-Arabiya, the resurrection of the Arab nation, aka the Arab Spring. The Muslim Brotherhood is a revivalist organization to bring back the caliphate. That means so is CARE, and so is MAS, and so is MSA, and so is NAIT, and all the rest of them. They're all front groups for the same organization. How you guys doing? There's a lot of hope, friends, because the little fish are on the move, and the big fish are helping. As Debbie said, there's more activism now, and I mean the best kind than I think you've seen ever, maybe? Certainly, it's certainly changed over the months and years that I've been coming up here. This is my 5th run through up in the Midwest. This didn't just start with my trip coming up here to help with the campaign. This is the 5th time in the last 2.5 years that I've been up to Minnesota. And I'm not just talking about driving through on I-94. I'm talking about staying. I'm going all over. I know this state better than a lot of people who live here. Oh yeah, take Highway 24. And
Can you just tell them that that's in Bloomington, Minnesota?
oh yeah.
Yeah, really.
Albanese, the guy in Bloomington, the one, what's the party that had their event there? Was it the...
Yeah, Liberty Caucus.
Yeah.
Liberty
And
Caucus.
Debbie and I got them on the line. We talked for about, what was it, Deb, an hour and a half trying to persuade them? Did it make any, huh?
Yeah, it was
Easy.
a good hour and a half on a Sunday afternoon. This good man was on the phone trying to reason, trying to educate, what's his name, Xavier Bycott, says this is not a good idea at all. This is an extremely dangerous mess, without success, unfortunately.
Okay, so there's one remaining portion of this symbol that we haven't talked about yet. What would that be? The part at the top.
The wording.
Well, if you're on my intel team and the supervisor, the watch commander comes and says he needs a briefing in 15 minutes on whether this particular symbol represents any degree of threat to our national security, and he comes back in 15 minutes and you don't know what it says up on the top, what kind of a grade on your briefing do you think you're going to get? You are the weakest link? Right? So what you do is you start over on the right with the little circle, the word on the right, and it says majama. It rhymes with pajama. And then the next word is fuqaha, which is the plural of fiqh. It means lawyers. And then the third word near the middle of the top says al-sharia. Exactly what it sounds like. And the fourth bunch over on the left is the amrikia. Can you figure out what that means?
America.
Yes. Majama fuqaha al-sharia bi-amrikia. Lawyers promoting Sharia in America. It's a lot different than the name in English, isn't it? And Almanisi, the guy, is it Bloomington?
Bloomington, yes.
Is one of the main leaders of this group. Right here, right in plain daylight. Which part of the Constitution says that this is illegal?
Article 6.
6. That's it. And what judges of what states are supposed to abide by it?
All.
You guys are good. Even in Minnesota. I didn't tell you the story about the bagger in his boat out on the lake. This is a true story. The bragger in his boat is always bragging about his boat. And my friend's dad and him were out on the lake fishing, and then he decides he's going to show off a little, so he lets my friend and his father on the shore, and look at this boat can do. And I don't know exactly, I missed this part of the story, that for some reason he felt compelled to go up to the front of the boat. And when he did that, the engine took off and across the lake, and he's going back and forth like this, trying to steer it to keep from hitting other boats or something in shore. All of a sudden it goes airborne, up in the air, and it turns over and poof, right on the water, and the engine falls off, that nice 35 horsepower Evinrude, down to the bottom of the lake, about 40 feet deep, with all the tackle and everything else. It's evening. You know how sound carries across water really well? Wow, those people are 100 yards over there and I can hear everything they say. All of a sudden they hear the screen door open and a lady comes out. She goes, "Are you okay? Or are you just screwing around?" So I say, "Ellison, are you okay? Or are you just screwing around?" "Well, we're not screwing around with you, bub." So this is why this kind of stuff has to come to a stop. And, you know, humor is still legal, so we should use it when we can. And then here's the thing I wrote, 23rd of January, talking all about this group. And I posted it 2 days after the inauguration. The first subject matter expert level document that was published in mainstream media telling everybody, including President Trump, what to expect was going to happen, because AMJ issued a fatwa saying that the election of Trump was a calamity and authorizing the Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimun, the Al-Muslima al-Islamiyya al-Qaeda, the observant Muslim base, to form an alliance with, guess who? The left. And have they done it?
Yep.
Absolutely. Linda Sarsour wouldn't be parading around America like Cleopatra if these guys had not given her the authority to do it, believe me. And they're cynically using her because she's female and, you know, like semi-untouchable. But she's the one that was out there with the bullhorn, egging on the Antifa to go up to the Capitol steps of the Supreme Court. And she's also one of the very first people who was kicked out of the hearing chamber for causing the disruption. That's Linda Sarsour. And she, by the way, is good buddies with Ellison. So this is like a circle of dominoes. It really doesn't matter where I start. They're all going to fall over before we're done. So this is an analysis of their fatwa 14 paragraphs. I found 30 different passages from the Quran woven through the thread of this fatwa, and otherwise disguise English language, unless you have to have the ability to see through the glass, through the camouflage. And that's exactly what they said, and it's exactly what happened. If you go look it up, you'll see, holy cow, this is really what they did. And then this guy, you know who he is? We've seen him before. He's a supporter of Ellison. And he's the founding member, president of CARE, the leader of CARE. AFEI cut off contact with them 10 years ago. So why would an elected official in Congress be going to meetings with an organization that has proven ties to terrorism, and nobody says a word about it? I'm telling you from a law enforcement officer, not from a political or social worker's perspective. Why in the world would you let somebody affiliate themselves with a known front group for Hamas and stay in Congress? I feel like Yosemite Sam, leaping horny toads. Papa, there he is on the left. There's Ellison. And the guy on the right is just as bad. That's Osama Jamal. He's the leader of the Bridgeview Mosque in Chicago, which is Muslim Brotherhood up to here. Total saturated. And that is what, 14? Well, he learned better. He doesn't do it anymore. Oh yeah? How about February? This is the one I just referred to a little earlier ago. He's at the New York CARE annual banquet, keynote speaker. Really. And this was all proven in federal court, by the way, in November of 2008. We're now 10 years down the road, and these same organizations are still operating in broad daylight. And they have caused incalculable amount of trouble and mayhem within our culture because they are the Muslim Brotherhood, and they are seeking to alter or abolish our current form of government, and they're not sly about it or subtle about it. It's right out in the open. And now they're running for political office. The top cop in Minnesota, do you think he's really going to address some of these issues that you're having here?
Yeah.
Open borders, shut down ICE, immigration, Hawala, all of it. How about female genital mutilation, for example? It's such a disgusting topic, I don't even like to say it. I feel like I should wash my mouth out with soap or slap myself, but I can't because it's real. And I think Debbie could probably tell you stories about that too. Unfortunately, it's such an ugly thing that you really have to have a lot of courage and a really strong heart. How about human trafficking? How about child brides? It's all happening. Girls go to public school, 7th, 8th grade, summer break comes, next year starts. You know, where's Aisha? Nobody's seen her. Where'd she go? Well, she's either in Perda, in a neighborhood somewhere in the Twin Cities, and not allowed to come out, married to somebody 3 times her age, or she was sent back home to marry a cousin in a village in Palestine somewhere, or whatever. You make up, because virtually anything you can imagine actually does happen. Not to mention the Somali guys that have 2 families, one here and one over there. And you'll notice if you were to go to MSP right about now that you'd see a big spike in traffic, outbound traffic, the guys coming from here, connecting through MSP to either Chicago or Detroit or Atlanta or New York, and off they go into the wild blue yonder, back home where they came from to support the other family that they have. And then they come back in the spring to work again as either taxi drivers or truck drivers. Well, how do I know all this stuff? I don't live in Minnesota. I did IDSO, Intelligence Driven Special Operation, for years when I was in Atlanta, and guess what it was? Interviewing Somalis. And guess where they were going? Twin Cities. And or Columbus, and or San Diego, and or Seattle, and or Atlanta. But the predominant, easy 50+%, right here. And we had all this stuff. It's called an intelligence-driven special operation. And what do you suppose we did with all the information? It went right into that same black hole that I was telling you about earlier. Like the administration just bulldozed it all right over the cliff. But does it still exist? Yeah, by the way. All the information that I told you about, and I don't mind saying it in public because I'm safe, because guess what? I kept it. And I put it on the only authorized piece of external hardware allowed by DHS. It's called an iron key. It's a big giant thumb drive with a special secret squirrel code that if you don't know it and try to open it, it self-destructs. And I gave it to Congress. And it's sitting inside the safe of 2 or 3 members of Congress, which I hope they will someday take that knob and adjust it, open the door of the safe, and that thing's going to be in there like a little blinking light. Beep, 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 beep. And take it out and put it in the computer and poof, there's all that information, and put it back into the system again and repair some of the holes in our national security. If I had the magic easy button, that's what I'd do. And I would also train my younger colleagues, former colleagues that are still active duty, how to do a case. There's 5 points. Observation of trends, questions you ask during interview, how to write up your case so it's coherent and legible for the other agencies, a standardized format, cooperation with other law enforcement agencies, and 5, the most neglected but most important of all, follow-up. Long-term follow-up. Because just like reading a book halfway through, then you put it down or you put it back up on the shelf and you never go back and finish the book. A lot of cases are like that, sitting up on the shelf. Started but never finished. So what's it? Rex, Lex, or Lex, Rex? Which one is it for us? That's Latin. For is the king law or is the law king? So in our constitutional republic, which one is it? Law is king. And what was the Revolutionary War fought over? The King George, Rex George was Lex. Nope. Well, the law is king, not the king is law. But now we're having a whole force of people are trying to say that the king is law. Well, who's the king? We are. The ones who say what it should be. So that's what this, look at this sign. Disobey, let them in, you know, no walls, no borders, anarchy, chaos, and violence. It's like the French Revolution. What did it start out as? Equality, fraternity, and liberty, right? What did it end up being before it was all over? Guillotines. Our revolution was different. We didn't execute all the loyalists. Same with the Civil War. President Lincoln said, you know, let's put it away and find a way of reuniting our country again. Americans are different. We still are. I have great hope, friends. I have a great love for my country because I've seen 1,000 groups like this one. And there's a strong undercurrent that's flowing across the country. I call it the Artesian River, underground, like underneath this floor right here. It's flowing from north, south, east, and west. And it's much stronger than the mainstream media is reporting or even admitting. I saw it in the lead up to the presidential. I saw it in the primary in Michigan, and I'm seeing it again. So everybody here can participate in that process, as I mentioned earlier. And by the way, age is no qualifier or disqualifier. Has nothing to do with it, because everybody here is capable of participating in some way or another. If all you do is put 1 point on a scoreboard called a vote, that's something. And we don't have the mathematics to quantify what your contribution or yours might be on a scale of 1 to X. But all of it cumulative together is enough. That's what we need, friends. So yeah, the law is king. And here's the Antifa Progressive Leftist Socialists. I call them the apples. See, because A-P-L-S. They're red, just like apples. And that's what they call themselves. They have a lot of variant names. Yeah, oh, there's Ellison. I'm going to be focusing on him because he's an equal opportunity collaborator. He collaborates with the green side and he collaborates with the red side. So this is Antifa. We've all heard of them, right? Anti-Fascist Handbook. And then here about this one. Does anybody know what that says in Spanish? Yo no creo en fronteras. I don't believe in borders. You don't believe in borders? Yes, you do. They're called sanctuary cities. So even you believe in borders. But nonetheless, the point is obvious, right? You're going to be AG of Minnesota, and you don't even believe in borders? then how can we depend on you to defend us? By the way, you know, what happens in Minnesota doesn't stay in Minnesota. It's not like Las Vegas.
Yeah.
What happens here is going to set a precedent that's going to bleed out across the borders into Wisconsin, into Iowa, into the Dakotas, and everybody in the country is looking at you guys now to see what you're going to do. Whether you're going to stand up for what's right and true, the commonsensical Midwesterns that everybody think you are, and take advantage of this opportunity. This is not something that happens every year or every decade even. It's something that only happens once a generation. And if you ever wonder what it was like way back yonder, you don't have to wonder anymore, because now is the time. And you won't have to wonder anymore. And I hope all of you can tell your family, your kids and grandkids and great-grandkids about the stories about what you did back then and way back in 2018. Really, Grandpa? Really, Grandma? You did that? I want to be like you when I grow up. Wouldn't that be the best thing to do? Zakor. What does Zakor mean?
Remember?
That's right. Don't forget, friends, Zakor. That's one of the most common themes in the prophets in the Bible is Zakor, don't remember, or don't forget. Remember. Talk about it. Just like, remember Spock? Remember. Okay, so that's Yo-Yo Crea and Contreras. He doesn't believe in borders. No wall, no band, no borders at all. Aren't they clever? And they want to also not only shut down ICE, but they also want to shut down the other agencies. See over there at top right? Abolish ICE. And what does it say next line? Abolish CPP. Hey, that's my agency. Try socialism. It sounds like, here, try some heroin.
Yeah.
Free our future. Abolish prisons. End immigration detention. Boy, this is anarchy. And then here's just another illustration. The new guard of the Democratic Party absolutely supports open borders. Well, who's the vice, the co-chairman, is it called, of the Democratic Party right now? Keith Ellison. And then this is real time. This is your law. None of your public servants are allowed to even ask about the immigration status of people that they encounter in the course of their duties. It's illegal. They are the ones that will get in trouble. It started out at the federal level, at the CBP at the top, and it filtered its way down to the state and local level. You're not even allowed to enforce the law. If you do, you're going to put your career at jeopardy. This is 1930 Public Safety Services. This is Minnesota Code. You think that that needs to be amended? You think that KE will do it? No, he'll add more restrictions. And then here's Linda Sarsour. That's why I call her Cleopatra. Political activist says that calls to vote against Ted Cruz, questions the faith of Muslims who defend the police. I don't care what any black person did before getting shot. This is his friend, Linda Sarsour. Not really, Mr. Haney. Oh, well, there's Keith Ellison's Facebook. And there he is supporting her. Now, this is a year or so ago, but he certainly never said anything to contradict it. She's the one that called for jihad against President Trump. So what I'm showing you is different spokes on the wheel. And even aside from the alleged domestic violence stuff, I've already showed you like 4 or 5 things that should disqualify him from being in office at all. Does anybody know what an SF-86 is? Standard Form 86, another government acronym. It's your background clearance paperwork. We all have to have it every 5 years. They have contractors, former CIA and FBI guys that come and interview you and your family and everybody who lives on your street and everybody you work for and your grandma and your grandpa and everybody. Is this guy okay? You know, have you noticed any behavior, you know, anything we should be worried about? They scour you, top to bottom. And if you don't pass it, you fail, you lose your job, you're out. If a law enforcement officer was affiliated with a known front group for Hamas, do you think he'd keep his job? Heck no. So we can't pass our SF-86s, but Keith Ellison is allowed to be keynote speaker at a group that's proven irrefutably by federal court DOJ to be connected with Hamas. Doesn't add up. But you guys can make a difference, and that's what I'm hearing, as I said, already. Now here's our buddy, Eric Holder. Fooey on being nice. When they go low, we kick them. Well, how did they even get low in the first place? They already pushed us low. Now they're going to kick us when we're down. Imagine that guy being your boss. And then this is Hillary Clinton. Cannot be civil with political party that wants to destroy what you stand for and so on. And yeah, there'll be civility once we get back in power again. So that's Humpty Dumpty. They define what civility is. So that's the last in the slide presentation. And I know there's a ton of other things that we could talk about. But before we take questions, while you're thinking about that, Marnie, would you like to tell about what happened at the MAS thing about 10 days ago? We did an intel op, guys. 2 of us. 2 little fish. And I'll tell you the punchline before he even gets to it, and that is that we disrupted their entire meeting. Ellison didn't show up. Assad Zaman was off balance the whole time, and we put the spotlight on the Muslim American Society. A threefer. Just 2 of us. And I dressed like an outstater with my beanie on, and no one ever said a word, like that beanie back there. And I was there the whole time.
Did you guys go in that together?
No, we never let on that we even knew each
I went in
other.
first.
I was always wondering about that.
No, we
First
didn't.
of all, do you like my shirt?
Yes.
Yes. Bye-bye, Keith. This is on Laura Loomer's website. And that's kind of our mantra is bye-bye, Keith, right? So I have to wear it tonight. So, yeah, about a week and a half ago, the Muslim American Society, which is a Muslim Brotherhood group, had a conference at the convention center. So I thought I'd go because Keith Ellison was talking. He was going to be on a panel with Ilhan Omar and a few other people, and I just wanted to hear what he had to say. I didn't really have any intentions of disrupting or confronting or anything. I just wanted to come and observe. So I went there, went down to the basement, paid my money to go in, and I don't know if all of you know I'm Jewish, so I was definitely a double infidel. I was a Jewish infidel in enemy territory. I was not nervous, though. I really wasn't. I was pretty excited, actually, to do this. So I knew Phil was going to be there, but I wasn't sure when he was going to show up. So I walked in and asked him very politely, where's the main ballroom? And they showed it me, and I went to the front of the room, about 3 rows back, and I sat down in the ladies section. And I was just sitting and taking some notes, listening to one of the speakers, where all of a sudden then a security guard came up and tapped me on the shoulder from behind. And he said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're going to have to ask you to leave. The organizers have said that you have to leave." And I'm like, what? Why? He could not give me an answer. Well, the organizers they just don't want you here. You're just going to have to go. And I'm like, no. And I started arguing with him a little bit. I'm like, I'm not leaving, and I didn't do anything wrong, and this is very embarrassing, and I can't believe you would do this. And I could tell he was feeling a little bad. Okay, because he was saying, well, ma'am, it's just my job, just my job. So I said, well, I'm not leaving, so he left. And I'm sitting. A few minutes later, he comes up again. By this time, though, I had gotten my cell phone out and was able to start taking a video, and I happened to have a purse that was recording, so I got some audio as well. And he told me, first of all, that I was using my cell phone, but I was not. My cell phone was in my purse. So he came up again, and I'm like, I don't really understand. Why do I have to go? And then he said something very telling. He said, the organizers have a list of people that they do not want to attend the program, and you are on the list. All right? This is Sharia, right? This is what happens in America when your civil rights are taken away by Sharia. I was the only person asked to leave. So I will just condense it. I went up to the front. I had a little bit of an argument with the Muslim guy there and the security guard. They really weren't used to having a woman argue with them. And they walked away after a while. They just kind of like, well, they just walked away. So I went back and sat down, because I'm stubborn. And then the program was concluded at that program, and then the security guard and the head of security came up again and said, you know, you have to leave, et cetera, et cetera. So by that time I had started to film me leaving. I can send you the video if you'd like. And when I was leaving, I was still arguing with the security guard, and he told me a bunch of lies. He goes, well, they told me that you were covered up when you came in, and then you uncovered, like I was wearing a hijab or something, and I wasn't. And we were taking cell phone videos, I wasn't. And then he said something interesting. He goes, well, you've been on social media, you know, you've been tweeting about this on social media, which I had been not at that time, but I have been very active on social media, and I've also participated in a number of protests against Keith Ellison. So they obviously knew who I was. I don't know if it was facial recognition software, or somebody knew, or they thought I was going to be there, but I was singled out, and eventually I did leave. So Phil will tell you that that was a very huge mistake on their part, okay, because they should have just let me stay. What would it have hurt if I were to stay and listen to Keith Ellison? But now they have kicked out an American citizen, an infidel, a Jewish woman out of the convention center, a publicly funded building. Now, Phil was there, and he stayed. Keith Ellison did not show up, right? This is the second time that he had not shown up for a scheduled event. I don't know, I think they might have called him to let him know I was there. Not sure, I got him to think so. But he did not show up. And they were rather upset because Phil will tell you that they were doing the panel discussion, and they sort of cycled around the panelists a couple of times, and they were fumbling around asking questions that they weren't prepared for, waiting for Keith. He did not show up. Phil, did you want to add something?
It showed me that he's become a liability. They're afraid of getting spotlighted, and that's what they were trying to do. And in their zeal to prevent or protect him from being supposedly or maybe spotlighted by her, they violated her constitutional rights. And it showed me that they're very one-dimensional. They're like flat playing cards. They are only capable of responding to challenges like this from an Islamic worldview perspective, and that they're not really accustomed or used to dealing with people from a constitutional perspective. And so they made a big mistake. We threw their whole meeting off. Assad Zaman, who was running it, was off balance the whole rest of the time. By the time the session was actually over and Marnie was out near the front door, there were only 50 people in the auditorium left. So they were realizing themselves that he was playing them, and that Keith Ellison wasn't going to show up. So that's what I meant when I said we disrupted the meeting, we threw them off balance, and it was a big mistake for them. And that's why everywhere Keith Ellison goes, you know, he's becoming a liability. He's a liability to the DNC. He's a liability to the Muslim community, who is trying their best to protect him. And what they're probably hoping is that he's going to coast into office on the momentum of his personality. Yeah, Dad?
Do you remember the name of the panel? One Nation Under God, Striving for the Common
Yeah, One Nation Under God. Sounds pretty nice. Striving for the common good. But what has CARE over the years told us that the Arabic word for striving is? Does anybody remember?
Jihad.
Jihad. So that's what I mean about deciphering this language. There it is right in front of you. If we take what they insist these words mean, then what they're really saying is one nation, the global ummah, under Allah, fighting jihad for the common good of our own community. Phooey on people like Marnie you're not part of it, you're on a list. And her question was, who made this list up? And, well, you know, who else is on this list?
What are they going to do with the list?
And then Ellison, you know, from the very start has been criticizing Trump about having what? A list. A list of people that can't come into the country. Oh, that's racist. A list of people on the no-fly list from DHS. Oh, that's racist too. So they have their own list while they simultaneously protest and complain about the U.S. government having one. So they spilled a lot of beans. And one other thing that Assad said that I found intriguing was right at the end, he was asking for volunteers to make phone calls for 40,000 Muslim registered voters that hadn't been contacted yet. Well, you may know the dynamics of the voter pool in Minnesota, but it's approximately 1.5 million R's and 1.5 million D's. Of that, of course, there's a proportion, mostly on the D side, that are registered voters in the Muslim community. But my question was, what proportion of the total is that 40,000? It's probably somewhere between a quarter, you know, or so, maybe a fifth. Point is, that's only a couple percent of the total voting pool, which told me when I did the math, they're worried. They're concerned about, however you want to put it, either the low numbers in the pool, the base for Ellison, or the fact that they're not getting a good response and they're trying to certify that these people will vote in favor of the ticket, the Muslim candidate. But it told me that they're concerned. They're lacking confidence that they're going to win. And I saw the same thing in Michigan with Abdul al-Sayed. I could tell by their body language and their words that they were concerned they weren't going to have enough votes. And also the ticket was split with the female candidate for Democratic candidate for governor. And I was right. He didn't pass the primary. So that was an indicator to me. The math is starting to go against them. And now we see with the Star Tribune, and again, I'm not overconfident, but since the Star Tribune published this, I'll take it as a good indicator, because I know that they're really reluctant to publish the actual real numbers. And so Marnie and I did this. We never actually saw each other the whole time, I mean, except for maybe faintly briefly once. But no one ever knew that we were together, and it was just the two of us that did this. And so it just shows you, this is what I did when I was CBP. I was an intel officer. And I'm not conducting intel operations now to look for terrorists, so much as I'm conducting an intel operation for my own country, discerning trends and helping people recognize them, and then developing a plan of action on how to counteract it. That's what I'm here for. And if I ever did have the opportunity to go back and actually use my intel background against real terrorists, I would do it. But it would have to be a pretty well-defined job description. I'm not going to go back in and then get the hand in the face again. I'm going to have to really be able to do the work, and particularly to train the younger people how to put these cases together. But so I feel honored to be here. You have the opportunity to participate in history among some of the most naturally funny people in the whole country. Are you okay, or are you just screwing around? So are there any questions? Yes?
Does Marnie's tape have any, is it good enough to do something with, to show media or something?
Well, we have already put it out.
Before the election, to make it bigger? That's
we
my
have videos videos are out that I took.
Oh, I haven't seen those yet either.
Oh, okay.
Is Third World doing something with them? Or Third Rail?
It was United West
Oh,
wrote a
okay.
story, and they incorporated one of my videos in it and pushed it out on social media. And I've had it on my Facebook page. We haven't really done any big thing with it, but we could. I have the audio of it, and I have some video.
You only have about 12 or 13 days to do it.
Right.
Well, with the media blackout, I know you're not gonna see it on conventional TV or radio, but, and my other question really quick too, in just a few words, Phil, could you explain why you were, Eric Holder stopped you? If you had all this great intel, why were you stopped? Because it would be in their best interest too, you would think.
Because they've developed these criteria that we weren't allowed to develop cases based on religious affiliation. And rather than combine the tendency of a lot of people in the Islamic world to commit acts of violence, aka global jihad, they made this artificial separation, and to try to bridge that gap was considered racist and a violation of not only their civil rights and civil liberties, but also their privacy rights. These are foreign nationals again, remember. These are not lawful permanent resident green card holders or citizens born here or naturalized. These are people from foreign countries. It got so bad that the FBI, what happened? They elevated the standard to a probable cause, and that's dead. You're dead in the water at that point. Yes, sir?
Isn't it true that part of the issue is that Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, was infiltrating our political system? And that's why they were advising Obama, Carter, and that's part of the problem too.
It's very much the case. There's a thing called the Holy Land Foundation trial. You've all heard of it, right? It was in November of 2008. We're coming up on the 10-year anniversary. Well, another thing happened in November of 2008, too. It was called an election. And this new administration, when they came in, one of the very first things they did was shut down the intended second phase of the Holy Land Foundation trial, which was going to go after Nihad Awad, those people, CARE, ISNA, and NAIT, and shut them down as phase 2. That's why they were called unindicted co-conspirators. It's a legal term that allowed the government to retain the right to continue investigation up to and including probable cause in another trial. Obama shut that down almost immediately. And that was bad enough. But then they started bringing the individuals like Nihad Awad, who you saw, and the leaders of these other Muslim Brotherhood front groups. Not only did they not shut them down, they brought them into the administration and gave them positions of influence and authority. And now you've got an inevitable conflict between law enforcement guys who are SMEs, subject matter expert, like me, and them, who the administration considered to be their go-to SME. You got Muslim Brotherhood advisors and you got law enforcement collecting derogatory information. Which one are you going to take? They chose them, the Muslim Brotherhood, and publicly backed them during the Arab Spring. It wasn't just domestic. They expanded it into the foreign policy arena and backed the Muslim Brotherhood in the Middle East and destabilized the whole Middle East, shattered the governments of several countries. And so what would a person who took an oath of office do in a case like that? There's no, like I said, there's no room 243 that you go and knock on the door and they give you some handy forms and any more than there is for Marnie. Marnie has a little taste of what it's like now. They push you around and you don't have any recourse. Because the whole structure is oriented in the wrong direction, away from constitutional rights toward these undefined political concepts of diversity and inclusion and fairness and so on. But, so it's still a live story. The book is not an analysis of things that happened weeks and months and years ago. It's a live story. It's like a balloon. The birthday balloon, you know, they run out of fizz after about the third day and they sink down on the floor. This balloon is bigger than it ever has been because it's being proven virtually every day how true it actually is. We're seeing it on the national big screen now. And my hope is that we will find a remedy and we'll fix it. Because what's inevitably going to happen if these things are not fixed? More of the same, right?